Hey to all my sound engineers. Thanks so much for watching this next level of tutorial video. If you haven't already watched the band leader and sound engineer tutorial video, you're gonna wanna watch that first. Everything here is designed for the sound engineers, and it's going to be a series of, I guess, things in escalating difficulty or escalating order of importance when it comes to what you need to know about the role, the position, and some of the features that we're seeing on the board. So let's start with one of the most important ones, which is going to be this guy. This is a sound meter, and this sound meter is responsible for picking up the overall volume of the band and the room. Comfortably speaking, 90 decibels is our target range. Decibels are what we measure loudness in, and anything above 80 decibels can cause hearing damage if you listen to it long enough. Now, at 90 decibels, you should be able to listen to everything in the room for around 4 hours and not really have any problems with hearing, but it's very easy with these new powerful systems to get very loud, and then of course your ears adapt. And on top of that, we also have problems with the fact that since we are in the back of the room, we are actually getting the quietest point. And so where it might feel comfortable for us, it's going to feel loud for everybody else. So this is a sound meter. We have one over at the main bridge location. It's located in the back where you would find all of the stuff that's being charged, the iPad, things like that. It does get charged with a USB cable, so you'll want to set it back there every single time you're done, and you should be able to find it back there every time you start working for a service. So as I mentioned before, 90 decibels is the range that we want, and we want to do that when we're taking sound not from back here, but actually from in front of the stage. You want to place yourself about a third of the way up front, so that would be around rows 3 or 4, and the level should be averaging about 90 decibels is what you want. If you start seeing 93, 94, 95, you're too hot, you'll need to bring the overall volume of the stage down, and we'll talk about ways that you can do that in just a second. Really quickly though, I just want to share how to work this particular meter that we have. Power is really simple. You power up the button in the center, and then from there, there's one setting that I would adjust every time you turn this on. So you'll see at the very top, just above the numbers, it says fast, meaning that it's very quickly listening to the impulses and the responses. What I would recommend as a good setting would actually be to set it to slow, so you're getting a much more even and less abrupt change in the sound levels. So the way that you would do that is you would simply use the pad on the bottom to go 2 to the right where it says F/S, meaning that you're switching between fast and slow. And then if I just click the big red button in the center really quick, you'll see that it changed from fast to slow. And even now, it's still jumping up and down in volume with my voice, but it's gonna give you a little bit better of an average reading. And from here, you'll see, like, obviously once it gets above 70, it starts to turn a little yellow. When it starts to hit 90, it'll turn red, meaning that you're getting into some slightly dangerous levels. So aim for that 90 number, try to keep it hovering around there, maybe just a little bit under. And then if you're measuring it from back here, you're gonna wanna reduce a couple decibels. So if you're measuring back here, 87 is about the comfortable level, just a few dBs below that. That's your decibel reading. Now, if you don't have one of these, like currently we don't have one of these at MKE, but what you could do is you could get an app on your phone that you can get for free. It's not quite as accurate, but it's at least a reasonable replacement. And same thing, if you're measuring your decibel levels, measure them from the second or third row near the front of the stage, not from the back, so that way you're getting a much more accurate reading. The next thing that we want to talk about on the board are DCAs. So DCAs are groups of channels. And if I go up to the board, just above where the buses are, this is the group DCAs. And you'll see that we have them divided into various groups. So we have drums, we have band, I don't know if you can see that in the video or not. We have vocals, we have effects, PC, the stream, and the pastors. Now, if you're just trying to overall lower the level of the drums, you could go over here and you could try and move all of these faders simultaneously. But what you could also do is you could just simply go over here to where the drum fader is on the DCA and pull it down. And now the entire drum is gonna be lowered in volume. It's a nice, handy, quick way of doing it. The band does not include the drums. So if you're operating with the band, then if you're trying to lower everybody, including the drums, then you'll need to use both of these. And then same with the vocals. These only include the vocal mics. So if the vocals overall are too loud, then you want to pull these down. I recommend that you only pull down, and that very similar to the other faders, we don't want to be pushing above that 0 marker. Everything should be in terms of reduction. And so if you're sound checking and then you get everything going and then you start using the sound meter and check the levels, this is a great place to just take the entire band down, not necessarily a need to start moving all of your faders and trying to rebalance stuff. Just pull all 3 of these down at one time. It's a good way to do it. Something else I should mention is that these don't quite work like buses, meaning that you can't add things like EQ or compression to these. They are strictly level control and nice for adjusting groups at one time. So don't treat them like buses, just treat them as master faders for groups of channels. The next thing I want to talk about is using effects. Right now we have 4 different effects on the board, and the way that you can find them is by clicking the bus 9 through 16, and you'll see that over on the right side, we have room reverb, vocal reverb, hall reverb, delay plus chorus. So I want to talk about all 4 of these and how they're different. So a room reverb is a short, quick reverb. It's not very long. It's nice for helping make things feel just a little bit more luscious, but not having a huge tail. I highly recommend using these for drums, are really nice. And depending on what style of song it is, it can be also really nice on acoustic, assuming that there's not already reverb on the acoustic in there. So for example, if I go over here and I click the select button for this particular channel, and then we're gonna click sends on fader, you'll see that the board has changed. And I've got some faders up for all of the close mics, so the snares and the toms, and these already have some room reverb on them. It's a nice way of just giving them a little bit more body and a little bit more energy. There are some things that you definitely never ever want to use these for. So things that are really bassy, kick drum and bass drum should never ever get this type of reverb added to them. You could offer it on keys. I actually have a channel that's specifically reserved for vocal reverb. And this vocal reverb is a little bit different. It's definitely not quite long like a hall reverb is. However, it is very luscious and has a nice smooth mid-range to it because it's a type of reverb we call a plate reverb. So if I go over here and kick this, you'll see that already the 3 vocal mics have plate reverb added to them or vocal reverb added to them. And you can obviously add more or less of these to the vocalists as you would like, but I feel like given what we've played around with, around this -10 mark is really good. I've noticed that I can have this on even when a person is speaking and not really have it affect the sound too much out front to the point where it's like distracting or takes away, and yet when you put it within the context of the band, it sounds really nice. There is also hall reverb, which is a much longer tailed reverb, and it can be really nice on instruments that need a nice smooth vibe to them. So for example, keys, you'll see that I have a little bit some on them already. I have some on the violin. Those are good places to start with them. You do need to be really careful though with hall reverb, because the more of this really long reverb that you get, the tougher it is to distinguish between different instruments. And so it's very much like makeup, where less does you a lot more. I wouldn't recommend adding too much of it. It should just be one of those things where it's barely noticeable, but if you took it away, you'd feel like it was a little bit too sterile. That's what I recommend. Now, finally, we also have a delay effect in here. And this delay effect is, I mostly use it on vocals. I like to do what's called a timed delay effect. And let me share with you how you can do that. So by default, I don't have any delay on any channels. You could add it to different vocalists if you would like. So let's say that somebody on, whoever was on mic 2 is our lead vocalist. If you're adding delay, definitely only want to add it to the lead vocalist for that song. You do not want to add it to anybody who's got backup vocals, because it will just make things way muddier. By default, the delay fader is all the way down. If you send it up, you're going to increase the feed that goes to that delay vocal. If you decide that you're going to pull this fader all the way down, let's say you know that somebody's going to start talking really quickly and you pull this down, you're not going to actually mute the delay. You're muting the signal that's getting sent to the delay. So if they say something here and then all of a sudden you hear the tail of their wording come out and then you pull this down really quickly, the delay will still, you'll still hear it trail off in the background, but whatever new words they say will not get caught in the delay. So this is how these faders tend to work. Even if you were to do something like hit the mute button, whatever last effect they did is going to still trail off into the distance. Now, I also mentioned that I said you could do a time delay, and over here on the right side of the board is this one flashing little button. And the purpose of this button is that if you have a song where you know you want the delay to go to the tempo of the song, you can tap in time with the song as it goes on, and whatever timing you tap here, that's how long the delay, the slap back, is going to be. So if you do it really slow, then the delay will come out very slowly, and if you do it quicker, now how fast that delay responds is going to happen much quicker than before. Next, I really quickly want to talk about something that is next to all of our stuff on the end of this board, which I have some parallel channels going on over here. If you don't know what a parallel channel is something that you send the main channels over to something on the board or some other slot, and then you do some crazy effects to it, and then you slowly but surely mix it in behind everything else, so it's a subtle addition. So the type of parallel compression that we're doing, or the type of parallel channels that we're doing, is parallel compression. And the idea here is that you can send different channels to these buses, to these groupings that we have, and then what we're going to do is we're going to compress the living heck out of them, and then we're just going to slowly but surely mix them in behind everything else. And these channels are set up so that way if you raise or lower your main mix over here, it's going to affect what gets sent over to your parallel channels over on this side. And so that'll increase or decrease the amount of compression that happens. There's two different types of parallel compression here. There's a parallel drum compressor, and there's a parallel vocal compressor. So this helps keep the two things that we need to have the most body and the most energy at the front of the room, the parallel drums and the parallel vocals happening. It shouldn't be something that you have to adjust, but if you feel like things are coming on just a little bit too strong, then this is the place where you could start to pull things down. It should be mostly a background task, and I don't recommend that you really do anything with them. It should be set it and forget it. But I wanted to just make you aware that these buses are here, and that if you, for some reason you're running into mixing problems where you're like, I can't figure out why I can't get the drums to tone down a little bit more. It might be your parallel compression, and you could decide to pull this down, or if you had a really soft song, you could even decide to just mute it entirely and let the drums be a little more natural or the vocals be a little bit more natural. Last but not least, I want to talk about something cool that we've started using in the board. So when you are sending stuff out with your faders and you're sending things out from the main mix bus, what you're actually sending are two different sets of signals. One goes to the main speakers, the front of house speakers left and right, and the second signal is actually heading to our subwoofers. And you actually have the choice as the mix engineer to decide what goes where. By default, we want as many things as possible going through the mains and as few things as possible going through the subs. The reason you have a subwoofer, a whole entire separate box, is so that way the things that require lots of low energy are not struggling to compete inside of one fixture or one speaker set. And so in the past, what we would have done is we would have done some low roll-offs where we would remove the bottom frequencies so that way the stuff that shouldn't go through the subs doesn't go through the subs. And that's not to say that the low cut filters are not still important or not still useful, but we probably don't have to be as aggressive now because we actually can individually, channel by channel, choose what gets sent to the subwoofers and how much of it. And I'm gonna explain how that works right now. Now, if you don't want to mess with this at all, some things have already been set up to go through the subwoofers and some things have not been set to go through the subwoofers. And if you never ever touch them, that's totally fine. In fact, for most people, I recommend that you wouldn't actually touch them. But for those of you who are brave enough and want to try or see what's all going on through, here's what's happening. In the upper right corner, there are two buses that say stereo bus and mono bus. Your stereo bus represents your main left and right speakers, and your mono bus represents the subwoofer. Our first channel that we're gonna look at is the kick drum. The kick drum is being sent through both the stereo bus and the mono bus. And if I hit view for a second and we look at its level going to the sub, you'll see that it has a 0 decibel send, meaning that it's whatever gets sent to the mains is the same level that's getting sent to the subwoofers. And so as a result, the kick is gonna sound big and nice and heavy and punchy because it's getting signal sent to the subwoofer. By comparison though, if I go and click the snare drum, you'll see that the subwoofer is turned off and there's 0 level being sent to it. And that's because the snare drum usually starts to roll off around 180 hertz, around there. And the subwoofer is really only designed to operate at 100 hertz and below. And so as a result, we don't want to send any signal there whatsoever because we want the subs to be completely dedicated towards the things that will actually make use of them. So the snare is not getting anything sent to that subwoofer at all. If we go to the high tom, you'll see the same thing. The second rack tom, same thing. If we go to the floor tom does actually have some signal being sent there, but you'll also notice that there's just a little bit less than the kick drum because if the two have to compete for low end, we want the kick drum to win. So we just pull a little 3 decibel bump out of there and now it's getting just a little bit less inside the subs. Same thing with the hi-hat, no reason to have it in there. The overheads, no reason to put it in there. The bass drum, or the bass guitar, excuse me, will get some. This is the only other thing I have currently that competes with it. And if we go from other channels to other channels, there's nothing else that shows up inside these subs. If I go over to the vocals now, nothing inside the subs. The only other thing that currently sits inside there is actually the PC audio. And that's because the PC audio will actually tend to use it. So this is our breakdown of how the basic buses work and everything, and that also brings us to the conclusion of all of our effects units and our effects sends. I don't really have anything else to add, but hopefully this should give you a complete insight on all of the things you might need to make the board work well for you or what some of the big changes have been. If you have questions, don't be afraid to let me know. Otherwise, use this video as some tutorial instruction for trying to figure out some of the more advanced things and how to make your room sound as good as possible. Anyways, best of luck.